Have you ever seen beautiful mixed media backgrounds and wondered, how did they do that? Well, today I'm going to show you a few easy steps that you can take to create a beautiful mixed media background, just like your favorite cards. These are the supplies we're going to use today, all from Rubbernecker stamps. The first one is called Fall Pumpkins. Hint, hint, the kind of card we're going to make today. So I love the detail. If you look at the pumpkin, look how detailed that stamp is. This is beautiful. And we're also going to use the coordinating dies that come with that stamp. Next is we're going to use the Fall Leaf stencil. Guys, this is a beautiful stencil that needs to be a staple in your crafty home. The next thing, we're going to use that sentiment from Splatter Leaves. Then we're going to use some color fuse inks in some fall colors. And then we're going to use, throwing stuff around here, sorry about that. And then we're going to use this Lattice Cover Die. And we're going to use all of these to create our mixed media background. Are you ready to do that? Let's start with the first step. Add a layer of color. Now, I am taking one of the color fuse inks, the lightest color, and I'm just adding a layer of color with my blending brush. And I'm going to build on this just a little bit to create some interest. So I'm just applying color. Now I'm going to go in and apply the color to my glass media mat and spray it with my water bottle. And I'm going to do a little ink smushing. And what that does is it just adds a little more interest to your base of color. Anything you can do to add a little more texture, a little more interest, makes a big difference. Look at that. Look at how beautiful that looks just by doing a little more ink smushing. Now, the second step would be to add interest with a stencil. And this is where that beautiful stencil comes in. So now that I have my foundational layer there, I'm going to add more color through the stencil. So what that does is it adds more color to your base, but it also adds some interest because you're forming a little bit of a pattern. And the pattern doesn't have to be concrete. It can definitely be abstract. We're just trying to add some interest to the background. So now I'm going in with a little bit of green, using a very, very light touch. I just want you to barely see this stencil peeking through. I don't want it to be a really solid image. And I think that's the beauty of mixed media, is just to be able to make everything work together and play together and not have one thing stand out over another. Now I'm going in with a brown color fuse ink and adding a little bit of that color too. And I'm peeking through the stencil just to make sure that I'm getting some color in the way I want it. And now you're going to see how this looks when I've finished. Isn't it beautiful? Look already how much more we have going on just with 2 layers. Beautiful. So I'm not finished. I want to go in and spray some water directly onto that card panel, because what that does is it causes the ink to react, because I'm using watercolor paper, and then you get little splotches of color on there that add even more interest. I'm pointing to them there if you can see that. So now the next layer would be to add texture with dies. Die cuts can add some texture to your background without competing with what's behind it, if that makes sense. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this lattice die that I had just die cut in white cardstock, and then I'm adding some embossing ink to it, and I'm going to emboss just a portion of this, and you'll see why I'm only embossing a portion of it in a minute. But I wanted to add a little bit of color to it and a little bit of shine, so I'm using some embossing powder. Now, embossing powder is a great element to use on a mixed media background panel because it adds shine, it adds texture, it adds interest. And you can use gold, you can use metallics, you can use any kind of embossing powder you can get your little hands on and add that texture. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down. I'm not going to cut it right in half. I'm going to cut it in an angle. And this is going to be the other layer that I'm going to add over the one we were previously working on. So I'm just kind of cutting it to the best of my ability without trying to destroy it. And somehow I did not manage to destroy this. And there you have it. So I've got my next layer ready to go. And so now, look at how good that looks. Now it is time to put the layers together. So I went in the back end and I added a little more embossing powder onto the couple corners of that base that you see there, the card base. I just did that on the side just to add a little bit more interest. And now I am going to adhere that lattice die over the bottom portion of this card panel. And those are all the layers. That is all there is to this, guys, to creating a beautiful background mixed media card panel. But alas, I was not finished. I had to do more because it's never enough. So I went in with some purple color fused inks and added some splatters just to add a little bit more color to it. You can barely see it, but it's beautiful. So I wanted to show you that on the side I had colored and die cut the pumpkins, the leaves, and the gourd, I believe it's called, from that stamp set. And I just wanted to show you how pretty they look when they're colored. And that's what I'm going to put over my background card panel. But I didn't want to focus too much on that because today's theme was about focusing on that mixed media background. So now that I have the background put together, I am just playing around with the focal point and deciding where I want to put it. I call that staging. So I stage everything before I adhere it down to make sure that all the little pieces are right where I want them. So when you're creating a mixed media background piece, just remember to have a base layer, then grab a stencil to add some color and some interest, and then grab a die to add texture. And don't forget to think about embossing powder and how embossing powder can play in there as well. If you use those three elements, you will, without a doubt, come out with some outstanding backgrounds. And you can create them all in one setting using different colors, and then you have backgrounds ready to go when you need them. I'm so glad you came by and joined me today. Everything that I used here will be in the description box. And happy early fall to you.